Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds, I'm Nerdarchy Dave, and today I have Jared Blando with me. How are you doing today, sir?
Very well.
I was
Very, very well.
I
How you
was
doing?
definitely excited to see you on the schedule because we go back a ways. You went to art school with my youngest brother. I've moved you a couple times, I think. So it's kind of cool. So we have a little bit of history.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, we do.
so
It's been a while.
We were just talking about that a little bit and gaming. You've worked on a bunch of D&D books with the cartography, making maps, which is super cool. I remember the first time my brother Ryan had pointed out one of the books and was like, "Look, it's Jared," which is super cool. So,
Yeah, it's been crazy.
for anyone that doesn't know who you are, you want to do a quick primer into your world?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a freelance illustrator. I live in Portland, Oregon. I used to live in Philly, and I've been illustrating for 15 years, about that. Um, Maps are kind of my bread and butter, I guess. That's what I'm known for. But I do a lot of different types of illustration. Um, Working on D&D fourth edition, and then obviously the release of fifth edition and all that was a pretty major boon. And I continue to work in the industry on various things, and it's fun. It's definitely fun. Some ups and downs, mostly ups.
Well, I mean that's life, though, pretty much ups and downs. So,
Oh
how
yeah.
I always ask these days, and actually one of the reasons we brought the live chat back is we figure people are home, they've got nothing better to do. So, how's your apocalypse going?
My apocalypse is fun. It's the same. When you're a freelancer, you basically it's the same stuff. Like you live and work at home. You make most of your own meals or you order out, and that's why you have a wife so she can get you. No, I'm just kidding. So when you go to the store, it's not that big of a deal. It's mostly hasn't impacted me the way that it's impacted a lot of other people. So I'm actually quite fortunate. Um, it, it's kind of a crappy situation. Hopefully, it'll improve soon. But yeah,
Yeah,
nothing too crazy over here.
that's how it is for me too, and even my partner Ted is like for the last few years we both have pretty much worked from home, so nothing's really changed. There's just more people in our houses than there usually is, and they won't leave. But other than that, So, most of our audience is gamers, RPGs. So, what are some of the stuff you worked on and they might recognize your work from?
Well, obviously D&D stuff. Hmm, that's a good question.
You mentioned you've been working on some third party stuff.
Yeah. Um, yeah. The so basically, like in relation to D&D, there's a lot of like crossover. So like when Acquisitions Incorporated, the Penny Arcade guys did their book, they asked me to do all the maps for it. So they did a source book. This For DC Comics, we were just talking about that. The comic's called The Last God, the series, and they're doing a source book. They did one, so I did the maps for that. Um, Little things like crossover maps, like released for special editions via third parties for Wizards. They actually do hire out third parties to produce some of their stuff. Um, so which that's kind of interesting. Not so much directly for Wizards anymore. A few things here and there, like as I said, the LTRL map and Avernus. But no, I don't know. I work for a lot of smaller companies. I mean, not like the gaming industry is that big,
Yeah.
but like Cubicle 7 is probably the next biggest one. So they have I did the Lord of the Rings map. Um, so they were on schedule to release second edition of their the One Ring RPG, and they couldn't renegotiate the rights. So like all that work is in limbo now. So I did this massive Middle Earth map that no one can see until somebody picks up the rights for it.
Are
So
you
that's kind of sucks.
are you a Tolkien fan?
I am an ardent Tolkienite, sir. It's embarrassing.
I am more of a I'm a filthy casual when it comes to Tolkien. Uh, they're they were like the first books that I read in like eighth grade. I loved them, enjoyed them
Mhm.
then. But now, I actually prefer the movies over the books. And I know some people like religiously like will read those books every year. But the pacing for me is just too slow, and like the archaic writing style, I just don't dig as much. And I know it might be like heresy in this, amongst other nerds, but I just prefer other things now. Like probably Moorcock and like Elric and that kind of stuff more so. If I'm looking at like older writing, but
Well,
the go ahead.
I would say like that's fine. You know, that's like it's sort of like there's people that like really like high fantasy stuff, which is cool. I'm a like me personally, like I'm a fan of like Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, which is a really it's I would consider it high fantasy. It's really dark and interesting. But and then there's Conan. I love Conan too, which you could also consider kind of high fantasy, sword and sorcery. More. Lord of the Rings is essentially an Anglo-Saxon myth. You know what I mean? So it's less. There's high fantasy elements in it, but it's told in a really grounded way, and it's not really in the vein of like a Conan-esque adventure, like modern fantasy. Um, and I like a slow burn, like the
Hmm.
build up, as opposed to like I'm not a big like super high magic guy, with like there's like floating cities and everybody can just like kind of toss fireballs at will, and that's fine. That's there's definitely a place for that, and there's a lot of good shit in that kind of world. Um, but yeah, I see where you're coming from. There's a lot of people in the same boat. They love the movies, they picked up the book or the books, and they just didn't take with them.
Yeah, like
It's one of those
I'm
things.
glad I have read them, and like I said, I enjoyed them. And it's like a grittier, more realistic, and I think I just like it's not even high fantasy as much as action, right? If you think about those books, most of the time they just like ran away from everything, which makes sense because like no one wants to die.
Well, well, it's also when they do have a fight scene, he doesn't really describe the fight scene. Like the fight scene in Balin's tomb is, it's like, and they came together, and this and happened. It's not really like the modern. I would say like what's his name who writes about Drizzt.
Oh, all right,
A lot
Salvatore.
of people. Yeah, a lot of people grew up with those books, Ari Salvatore, and he's like, I think he's a martial artist, so he likes that kind of like gritty stuff. And I'm like, I don't care about that. Like I use my imagination to think of the fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like Tolkien's very much, and that might have been an inspiration from Tolkien. I read them when I was like 10. On the school bus, going to school and coming back. That's how I read those books, and it was just like a gateway into like another world. You know what I mean? And it was just so it felt real. And I read a lot of fantasy now, or some fantasy, and I'm just like, eh. It's like to me, like 95% of fantasy, I'm just not really that interested in currently. Um, that doesn't mean that it's bad. It's just I'm just not really my cup of tea. Um, but yeah, I don't know. The movies, the first one's great. The second one is not so great, and then the third one is really not great.
Diminishing
Personally,
diminishing returns. But it's funny you
yeah.
mentioned that. Like I read those books the same way, like going into and from school on the bus.
Mhm.
It's like a nerd rite of passage, I believe.
Yeah, I mean it's weird when like there's a fair amount of people that have never read, like they love fantasy and they've just never read Lord of the Rings, and uh it's a shame. I think it's kind of like it's sort of one of those things that you, even if you're not like a big fan, it's like paying homage. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It's like if you like science fiction, you should read Starship Troopers by Heinlein. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of one of those things where it's kind of quintessential to modern science fiction. You know what I mean? Um, but that's just. I'm talking out of my ass, right?
It's a required reading. You heard it here. Although that's a lot of reading, especially if you're a non-reader.
Yeah, but you know what's funny though? Lord of the Rings isn't really that long. It's like totally like if you look at Game of Thrones, each
Yeah.
book is like 900, and I love Game of Thrones, the books. Each book is like 900 pages. There's 5 books.
Yeah.
Tolkien, the entire trilogy is like 1,000 pages. Like it's not that long. You know?
I guess so. Maybe I'm just like remembering from when I was a kid and read them. So actually, you kind of got me started on the Game of Thrones kick. You had loaned me a couple of the first books, and I had read them. Do you think he's ever going to finish that series?
Absolutely. Unless he dies. I mean,
I'm kind of like banking on that he's going to die first. Unfortunately, I don't want him to die, but
he looks like a fat Greek sailor.
Yeah.
And he acts like a surly Greek sailor now because everybody's so angry at him. It's been like 9 years?
Forever. He's got all that HBO money, man. It's gonna all get blown on hookers and blow, and he's just gonna have a heart attack, and we'll never get the rest of the books.
God bless him.
He's gonna totally Robert Jordan us. So
yeah, but you know what though? I gotta say, I read Wheel of Time, and they could have cut out. I think we talked about this before years ago, but I think they could have cut out like books like 7, 8, and 9, and it would have been all right.
Yeah, I forget if it was book 9 or book 10 that I just stopped in the middle somewheres and never went back. I was just like done.
That's acceptable. I mean, it is lit. He should have written like women's soap opera stuff. Like it's just very like. I like some of the characters. Some of the female characters are great. Some of the male characters are all right. Like Rand is great.
Yeah.
But like Matt was good, but like went on too long. And like what was the other one?
Perrin
or Pippin? Perrin.
It was Perrin. Yeah.
I was just like, I don't care. And then you had like all their names sounded the same. Like it was really weird decisions. Like ultimately Sanderson I think picked it up, and the last 3 books that he finished off for him were good. Tarman Gaiden was an entire book. Like everybody complains about the Pelennor Fields. I'm like, it's a fucking chapter, dude. Like, are you complaining about a chapter? Tarman Gaiden is 1,000 pages of a battle. It's like, oh my god, it's so long.
That is a long battle.
Long. It is
1,000 pages. That sounds like it should be a war, not a battle.
It's the entire book is Tarman Gaiden, which is the end of the world or whatever. And
yeah.
I'm like, this is like an exercise in like just excess.
Yeah.
So much. So
our website guy, Nerditor Doug, says when they start including 1,000 pages of appendix, I'm out. That is a lot.
That's a little. So you can excuse Tolkien, I mean, but like, yeah, for a lot of people, they just like make shit up. They're just like, and this happened. Oh, all right.
It's like reading Genesis.
Oh God. Yeah.
So we were talking about a little bit about gaming a little bit before we got started here. You're playing some Modiphius games, you said?
Yeah, I just recently got pretty heavily into Star Trek Adventures, and it's great. It's really cool. Great system.
So I imagine that's getting played online.
Yeah, I'm playing it through Tabletop Simulator.
Okay.
I run campaigns through Roll20, like an old Warhammer 2nd Edition campaign, a D&D campaign, and I guess it's not surprising, but I'm more of like a tactile person, and so I love the Tabletop Simulator. Like it's worked out. I've never actually run a game before through it until recently, and it's awesome. Like it's so cool having everything there. I can make my own tokens. I do a lot of for my Patreon, like I do these massive, detailed maps, and I can actually bring them into the Tabletop Simulator and make them boards, and you can just like play on them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a really neat, and you can do that with any artwork basically. You can just bring it in and So it's been kind of a new experience with that. I don't know if a lot of your viewers like use Tabletop Simulator as opposed to like Fantasy Grounds and Roll20 and all that stuff, but
Yeah, so obviously I've heard all those names. Astral's another one that's supposed to be pretty decent. Tabletop Simulator, I heard about that being used for tabletop RPGs first through my son, who's 19, and I guess some of his friends
oh,
use that.
okay.
But is that a Steam thing?
Yeah, it's Steam. It's like $20, I think, for the program, and then and there's sales like all the time. But what's cool is like, so they have like, Steam has like Steam Workshop. So like basically everything that you use in it, like the current, I actually have the place that we play in is literally like it's like a holodeck. So the guy who made it, he just made it. And it's like you're playing in a holodeck. You have all these like badass things. He brought everything into this to make it feel like you're playing in a holodeck in like on, I don't know, on the Enterprise. And it's just really neat. Like there's a lot, you could bring in music and but it's all free. I mean, that's what's crazy. You just subscribe to their channel or whatever on through the workshop, and it just downloads, and you can pick and choose what mods you want to use, and it's pretty amazing. There's a lot of bang for the buck.
So that current campaign, you're the GM.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
so what kind of like what kind of stories are you telling with that system?
Well, right now it's pretty much like we're doing. I just got introduced to Star Trek adventures, so I'm like, despite being a Trekkie and all everything, I was like, I know it came out like 4 years ago. There's been a couple of Star Trek RPGs, and they've all been not bad, just not well supported. So I picked this one up, and a lot of my friends are Trekkies, and so I was like, hey, anybody want to play? An online campaign? They're like, yeah. Everybody freaking jumped on board. So now I got five officers, and so we're going through the starter campaign, or starter mission, and I'm basically doing it as like a sim. So they're like, if you know anything about Star Trek, um, it's like it takes place in like the Prime universe, and they placed it right in the best spot. It's like Voyager hasn't left yet, the Dominion's just been discovered, and all these like pivotal events have yet to happen in the franchise shows. So you can
Okay.
kind of go anywhere you want with it. So, um, but yeah, so Federation's arming, so they're in a sim and they're going to get their ship, and then we're going to go. I'm going to write some adventures for it, and we'll see where it goes.
Nice. They're going to get assimilated.
Hey, we have one of our officers is a Trill, an unjoined Trill, who was a reclamated Borg. So they were actually turned into a Borg,
Uh huh.
and then they were reclaimed. So that's our XO for our ship. So we got a little Voyager touch in there. I don't know if a lot of reviewers are Trekkies, because if you're not a Trekkie, you don't know what the fuck I'm talking about.
I suspect there's a decent crossover. Yeah. So once you become a Borg and you're not a Borg anymore, but can you still get one of the symbiotes?
Um, it's it well, there's a lot of writing in there. I don't know. I don't. They never really delved into the Trill thing. It actually came up during character creation. I was like, so now you're like a cross species, because you're using two species. Technically, Borg is one of them. And now, yeah, and he's like, well, could I be like a join Trill with like I was like, I don't think this. I think the symbiote would be killed. Like they would just like try to turn it into a Borg, and then you have like a mechanical symbiote. I don't know. I was like, we're not doing that. You're unjoined. I don't even want to deal with that mechanically. It's a pain in the ass.
Oh man.
So
I'm just picturing like a symbiote that's been Borgified.
I mean, they could turn you back as a human. I mean, Picard was famously turned into a Borg, and then he was recaptured. So you can be turned back. But it is it is varying degrees. Picard is completely normal. I don't think he has any implants left. Whereas somebody like Seven of Nine, who's another character in Voyager, she's got multiple implants in her. Like they can't get them out. So And there's actually, that's one of the cool things in the game, is you can actually decide how many implants you have as a character, and they do different things. But it's a role playing mechanism, because the more implants you have, the worse your presence is. Like, people look at you askew. Not only are you essentially an enemy of the Federation, you also look like a weirdo.
Yeah.
You look like the enemy. Um,
More
so it's kind
importantly,
of neat. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But mechanics wise, the game is very intuitive that way. Especially, it's a lot of work for a GM. A lot of it is like role playing, and a lot of the rules and kind of difficulty rules are left up to the GM, and that's like really frightening for a lot of people. But I don't know. I kind of like those games more than, like, D&D 5e is great, but it's a little more mechanical than something like Star Trek Adventures.
That uses the what is it, the 2D20 system?
Hmm.
Yeah, because I think Middleearth uses that for a few different games, which I have not checked out yet. There's too many games, too little time.
Yeah, tell me about it, man. It's ridiculous. It's like, oh my god, the RPG market is just every fucking month there's like 40 RPGs with high quality art and 14, 15 Kickstarters, and I'm just like, I stopped Kickstartering. I'm just like, the only Kickstarter I'm in is the BattleTech,
Uh
so
huh.
I'm a big BattleTech guy, and that's another fantastic world that needs a good RPG and does not have one, which is amazing to me. Um, but yeah, other than that, I'm just like, nah, dude,
Maybe
I
you're the guy
can't.
that has to make it then.
Eh,
In all
I've
your
done
free
some work.
time.
Yeah. Well, what's funny? I'm stepping back from a lot of my at the end of the year, I'm pretty much stepping away from freelancing. Um
Oh, what's that
it's
look
kind of
like?
a it's I got two books out now. The second book came out in November. It didn't have a lot of fanfare because of what was going on with the first company went under, and they were bought by Penguin Random House. There's a whole bunch of drama, but they're doing good. The first one's still doing good too. And I'm just like, I've been doing it for a while, and I kind of want to I want to go more into self-publishing. There's certain games I want to put out, self-publish. Patreon, obviously, I've been doing that for a few years, and I have a small but devoted group of people. Uh, I'm not one of the mappers that has like 8,000 patrons. But I don't know. It's like you get tired of just working for other people, and having to deal with everything. You get good art directors, some great art directors, and then there's some not so great art directors, and certain projects that you love, and other projects that you know you kind of you do because you need to do it. Um, so it's scary. It's kind of scary, but I'll probably still pick up projects here and there. I'm not going to turn away somebody, uh, a big company. Um, but I'm just not going to be picking up like tons of these tiny commissions, and I'm just like, nah, dude.
Yeah,
Get to the
I
point. You want time.
I feel you on the bad art directors because I had to art direct my first book, and I did not enjoy that job at all. I feel like to be good at it, you kind of have to be a bit of a prick. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
because like, and I just hated the whole process of like weighing other people's work and like telling them what to do, and then like even like evaluating the higher artists. It's like you're weighing their worth as a human being based on their art skill. It's like it just is weird to me anyway. And I'm not
Well,
from
I
that
think,
world either, you know.
yeah, a lot of good art directors, at least in my experience, they have been artists. They've been in that position, so they know what they're asking, what's logical, what's feasible and not super annoying. But they also know like what needs to be done. I actually like an art director that's like, no, like I'm gonna rein you in, because I'll take a project and run with it, and then I'll be like, hey, look at this, and they're like, sometimes they're like, oh, that's great, like you went in the right direction. Other times they're like, nah, like we need to pull you back. And I'm like, that's fine, like that's good. You kind of want to have them on a bit of a leash, because artists will just do what they think is right, and sometimes it's not. Like,
A firm
you
hand,
know.
you're saying, huh?
Yeah, firm hand's good. Because you get wishy-washy art directors, or you get, the worst is multiple. When you get two
Yeah.
or three art directors on the same project, and you're just like, you feel like you're being torn, and they don't know, and the indecisiveness bleeds through because you're afraid to work on a project, to go forward and to take chances on a project, because you don't know what they're going to say or what they're going to do. And if you go too far, it's just going to be more work down the line.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially if you're talking about multiple. That's even worse. It's like you're being pulled in two different, in two, three different directions at once. Especially if they don't have the same vision. So
Oh
that,
God, yeah. There's been a couple projects like that, and I'm like, how do you guys? It's like when, in the RPG industry, because it is a small industry, so you get a kind of like a lot of like mom and pop kind of companies,
mm-hmm.
and so it'll be like a group of friends that like goes in, and they all have stake in the company, and it's like, and then like there's like 7 people at the table. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I've actually been. I've spent, like, overspent, if they paid me, or they're going to pay me however much. And that's kind of how I budget my projects. I'll throw a quote out, and that's kind of, how many man hours are going to go into it, what I think it's worth, and blah, 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 blah. And I've gone way overboard on some projects because, you know, there's, there's 7 people or 5 people all beating around the bush. And I'm like, it finally got to the point where I'm like, you allocate one person, and I'm going to listen to that one person. It's like you have to take them to task, which is like
Yeah.
not a good situation to be in. So,
Well, at least we didn't have that going on. Like we had one dedicated person that would work with the artist, and the cartographer. And it
I
was
saw the
me.
book. It looks great.
Yeah,
What I
yeah.
saw so far.
I attribute that to the people we worked with more than anything. Kim Van Doom and Daryl T. Jones were excellent to work with. And also Sarah Dallinger that did the cover. They were all amazing artists to work with, and they were able to take my nonsense and turn it into things. So that was really good. But also with what helped with a lot with that was our actual lead designer. The way all the encounters were written out. I think it also made it really easy for them as well because he did a good job of kind of capturing the feel and of each encounter. So that was super helpful. I was
Oh,
just there to like you said, rein things in or be like, all right, this is the size we need.
here are the basics. Take the
Yeah,
ball and run with it.
I
But
learned a
that's the
lot.
thing. That well, that's good. It's also like you notice. It's funny, like people will balk at like a price, right? Or they'll be
Yeah,
like, whoa, like that's way more expensive than I thought. But it's like it's a difference between hiring a professional and an amateur, right? I mean, it's like, yeah, okay, I'm going to charge you however many thousands of dollars for this piece, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, you're not just purchasing the art, you're purchasing the expertise, and like essentially you're getting a professional product. It's very different. And it's funny because in the RPG world, there there are a lot of amateurs. I hate to say that word, but it's like they're not in that. You know what I mean? They're still, I don't know. There's a lot of cheap work, and it's
yeah,
sad because it's, cheap work has its place, but at the same time, like there's something to be said about having a professional. You know what I mean?
yeah. I totally get that. The RPG industry is kind of a weird beast, and it's really tough because it's a small industry, and in some ways, it's a very cheap industry. And
Yeah.
I mean, and literally from the consumer on up. So and there's a lot of digital products in that industry as well. And as someone who's had to hire people to do things, it's like it's not so much that we don't understand the value of the work, but you're just looking at like, wow, how many of these do I have to sell in order to pay
Hmm.
for this one piece of art? And then you start adding up pieces of art. That's where I think that's where like some of the disconnect it comes from.
Sure.
It's
I
not
would say
like
the situation's gotten better because now the fact that the digital platform has expanded so much, it's a massive part of the market, and you don't have to worry about profit margins for printing and stuff. which is actually really cool, right? I mean, it makes it easier for a publisher. You can have high quality artwork, and if you sell a book for, 19.99 and you receive $15 of that, as opposed to selling a book for 50 and having to pay all the upfront costs for printing and then receiving like $8 from that. You know what I mean? Like the profit margin's gone up. So I think that's another reason why the industry itself has grown so much. It's cheaper.
Well, I will say, having, in the process of printing books now, making the book was more expensive than printing them.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I can see that. Yeah.
I mean, depending, like when you buy in bulk, right? It becomes a lot easier. But you're right. After it's made, with digital products, like you're no longer paying that cost anymore.
Right.
But you're also right, and I feel like the industry is getting a lot better, and the work we're getting, people are getting paid more for their work, and that's like that is the hardest thing. That sometimes I feel like gamers, as the consumers, they fail to realize. If you're so many people, they want to pirate stuff and they don't want to pay for it, or you want to pay very little for it, and I'm like, but you're driving all the talent out of the industry.
Yeah.
And
Well, this is what the music industry and the movie industry has been complaining about for years and years and years and years. You can't pirate stuff. Like it. I mean, I understand when I had nothing. You know what I mean? I would try to find books and I would pirate as much as the next guy. But now that I'm older, I pay for pretty much everything that I have. I don't think I pirated anything in freaking forever since like Pirate Bay. Like back in the day. But
now I pay for things
you
I
know,
don't even use.
oh, yeah.
So many
Nah,
Kickstarters.
you're right.
So many Kickstarters.
Well, have you? I don't understand the amount. All these board games they produce these massive, beautiful board games. All these miniatures, all this stuff. I'm like, it's gonna take me 8 hours to figure out how to play this game. It's gonna
Yeah.
take me 8 hours to run the game, and then you're the only one who's into it. So if you manage to wrangle your friends into a game,
Hmm.
like it's gonna last 2 hours. You're just gonna talk around, talk around the table and drink beer and not even play the game. And then the game is gonna be put in your closet and it's gonna sit there for like 10 years, and then you're just gonna sell it later.
The ever expanding shelf of shame.
Oh my god, it's
I
like that Conan game. I bought into that, and then I
Yeah.
got it, and I was like, this is way too much work, so much energy, and I just sold it.
What level did you buy in at?
The second to highest, like the $200 level, I think.
Yeah, like Ted did like something similar, and it's just he just has boxes of Conan stuff sitting around.
Yeah.
And I always break his balls about it. And every time we talk about it, I'm like, that Conan game Ted spent $5,000 on. Every time we talk about it, next time it'll be $7,000. But it's the same thing. He's like, oh, all these minis, I'll keep some, I'll sell some, and it's just all sitting there.
Well, it's beautiful. All of these games, I think what everybody's starting to realize is like the quality of the work has gone up. It's gotten cheaper to get quality work. Just at 3D printing and this and that, and the printing in general, and that's all great. That's all fantastic. The problem is that there's just so much. It's just time. These games want you. It's like playing 40K. If you play 40K, that has to be the only game that you play because there's so much shit to paint. You don't have time to play anything else. They're just like, no, that's it. You're 40K, bro. That's it. That's your fucking job now, is to play this game and
Yeah.
paint all the fucking minutes. Who the hell has time anymore? When you get older, like I'm 35, and I've noticed like in the last 5 years, I'm like, man, I just don't paint as much. I don't paint as much as these minions in it. I just don't have the time. I don't know. How about you? I mean, I'm sure you've noticed like your time to work ratio, like pleasure ratio, is just like it disappears, bro.
That's why when it comes to tabletop games that aren't RPGs, I like really simple, fast. A game I can play like, maybe 2, 3, 4 times in an hour. As opposed to like a long, protracted game where it's like, oh, we're gonna set this up and we're gonna play this and that's what we're doing all day. Like at that point, I just rather play D&D or another RPG as opposed to that. But like I just got a delivery from Mind and Cook Games, because I had gone on there for one of the Kickstarters I backed. I was like, oh, I better fill this out. And I realized there was like 3 or 4 Kickstarters that they owed me stuff for that I just never claimed. And I'm like, oh, I guess I should get it all. And like 2 boxes show up of
Oh my
RPG
god.
books. And it's just like, you see it and you're like, well, one, I just like to support things in the hobby.
Sure.
And then 2, it's like, oh, this looks cool, but like you only have so much, you only have so much room for so much cool in your life anyway. There's, between working and family, there's not a lot of time left, for stuff. And and when your hobbies are like RPGs, they take up a lot of time just in and of themselves. So
Oh god, yeah. Especially if you run games, people
yeah,
don't realize the amount of work. Like just the amount of work it is to DM. Like I actually run I run of all things, an AD&D Birthright campaign that I actually translated over to 5th edition from second because I
okay.
love Birthright is one of my favorite settings.
How hard was it
Uh,
to convert over?
well, thank God somebody actually did most of the work.
Oh,
It's a guy on he has a document on. Oh my God, I'm drawing a blank now, but it's one of those like living document pages for like
yeah.
D&D stuff, RPG stuff.
Seems like
I
a
think it's
thing.
RPG binder, DM's binder. That's it, DM binder. Um, but yeah, this guy had like done it, and he did a really good job. And then I kind of put a little bit of a spin on it. But it's a fuck ton of work. It's so much work. There's so much shit to do.
If you search Birthright 5e, the first thing that comes up is GM Binder. So
There you go, GM binder. That's it.
it's fairly easy
Yeah,
to
the guy did
find.
a great job. It's such a fun setting. It's like Arthurian legend.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like the like people are tied to like rulers are tied to the earth. It was it was actually quite a big AD&D setting at the time of it being cut when uh, TSR got bought out by Wizards of the Coast, and and they nixed like 3/4 of their settings because they're like, this is just ridiculous. Like we don't have the money to support all this crap. So unfortunately, Birthright was one of the ones that got cut, and it's kind of a shame because I find it like I like Greyhawk and I like Birthright. Those are my favorite. And there's a lot. There's tons of those settings, but
Did Birthright kind of have like a similar art motif to it as Greyhawk?
yeah, because it was all like the same kind of group of artists.
Cause I'm trying to remember back because I'm pretty sure I owned most of the box sets, whether I used them or not.
Um, I have an embarrassing amount of Birthright stuff now. I picked it up and I've gotten like all the player handbooks and like they released like 27 books for it. They're not all gigantic. Some of them are short, short, whatever. But like, there's a lot of material for Birthright, and yeah, I don't know. I love that. If I'm gonna go high magic kind of setting, that's the setting. But because even in that setting, it's like again, it's very Arthurian. So it's like the better the ruler is, the more his land blooms.
Mm-hmm.
The worse he is, the more it shrivels. And then like I love the idea of like having your blood is essentially the source of your power. But a lot of decisions are made, with steel, like armies march. As a player, the whole point was as a player, you're level 20, you've retired, you've bought your castle. Now what do you do? And that was what Birthright was about. Was like, okay, you're now a ruler, and your friends are your court. And so now, how do you rule your kingdom? And Birthright was like, okay, there's all these kingdoms, there's a setting, these are all the rules, and do it.
So how long has that game been going on?
Not too long. Like it's pretty in the middle. I think we've had 2 or 3 sessions, so I'm not gonna say it's like super regular. I
Uh-huh.
want it to be more regular, but I'm also involved in like at least 2 to 3 other D&D groups, and it's just like again, it comes down to like time and work. Um, but it's been fun. It's definitely different. The standard D&D 5e setting, like I'm not a big fan of Faerun. It's
Oh.
fine. It's like it's like Golaron or whatever for like Pathfinder. It's like, hey, what do we got? Everything
Yeah.
exists in this world. Play in it. And I'm like, okay, it's
We
fine.
yeah, we tend to do more homebrew stuff. Like I don't know. Our group has affectionately renamed Forgotten Realms Forgettable Realms because it's just all generic fantasy. I mean, even like Greyhawk to me and Forgotten Realms, they're just like basically someone else's version of Tolkien, right? With a lot more
Hmm.
stuff added in. So at that point, I would just like rather make my own version of Tolkien stuff, but a bunch of stuff added in.
Sure.
So it's my stuff. Now they were great. Like I liked reading in those settings, like the Forgotten Realms. I've books. I can't even name the number. You know, all the books that I've read. There was a point where that's all I was reading, and you was reading like a couple of those a week. So they're good reads, and there was definitely in the early days there was no shortage of books. That's for sure. So I
Oh
enjoyed it
yeah.
that way. But when it came to like if we're creating stuff and doing our own thing, much rather just make up my own stuff. And our group has kind of always been that way. Like if we were gonna play a setting, it was gonna be like Ravenloft or Dark Sun or Planescape or Spelljammer, something that was like very different than your normal generic fantasy. I think you know I think the first campaign where I actually ran in a setting for a while was Eberron. And it was only because they had that like Arcana Punk stuff in there. It was a lot different than what you were finding in your generic settings. So
Well, there's like, what's interesting? Like, I like economy. Like, I like things that make sense in their own world. And Faerun is so high fantasy, it doesn't really make any sense. Like you were saying, Spelljammer or Dark Sun, like they all have something going on. Like it all makes sense. It's more balanced. Whereas Faerun, I'm like, how does this world work? Why the fuck are there even like armies and like kingdoms? I'm like, y'all can like create like water at will. Like, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, and you don't lack for resources. Magic is just quick. It's everybody. There's a lot of people. I shouldn't say everybody, but a lot of people have it, and there is some interpretation there. Like there's a lot of Faerun, Forgotten Realms people that are like, well, you haven't played in the setting and you don't know everything. You're like, yeah, you're right. I read the Dark Elf trilogy. I like that. I didn't really care for the other trilogy, the Streams of Silver and whatever. Like I was, it's all right.
okay, yeah, the original one.
Yeah, yeah, it's fine. It's just too. I don't know. It's not realistic, and it's one of the reasons why I tend to migrate towards something like Lord of the Rings, where like the world feels more real. There's like I like Archmage settings where it's
Yeah,
like there are a few very powerful people, and then but most decisions are decided with steel. You know what I mean? Like it's that kind of setting because it feels like a Dark Ages, Middle Ages type of setting. It feels. I don't know.
you're
I
like
like to imagine myself like in that world, and it's easier for me to do that in that setting.
you're like, why is this even still a problem? Where's Dritz? Where's Ilminster? Why haven't they fixed this shit yet? Where in Eberron, like the high level NPC was like 12th level, like 14th level. They were uber powerful characters in those campaigns, in that campaign setting, because the idea was like we're gonna leave room for the players
Yeah,
instead of just having an Ilminster. Like, why is Ilminster giving me a quest? Like, can't he just like snap his fingers or something?
well, that's very AD&D, right? AD&D was all
Yeah.
about like birthright was like that. A lot of the rulers are only like seventh level to like ninth level. You know what I mean? Like and these are rulers of like countries, and they're not in the grand scheme of things. They're not in that world. They're powerful, but it's designed to like AD&D was fucking brutal. Excuse my language, but it was like you would get your ass murdered real quick in AD&D. The rules were a little less forgiving. Third edition came out, it was more, and fifth edition is very forgiving, which is fine. It's an evolution of it, but yeah, I don't know. If you made it to like level 12 or 15 in AD&D, you've been playing for like an insane amount of time with that character.
Yeah,
It's like a
it was a little more meaningful
yeah,
because like
yeah.
and also like that there wasn't, so third edition codified things, made rules for things, and the CR system, right, where it's like, oh, you're gonna face an appropriate challenge rating for your character's party and their level. Where AD&D was like, what? You're gonna fight 3 kobolds in this room, and there's gonna be 6 trolls in the next. Figure it out.
It's true.
And then,
It is. It's true.
and then down
Yeah.
the hall, there's a dragon. We don't know why, but it's there. So,
Well, they left it to the player to be like, don't go in that room.
yeah.
It's essentially the game is telling you, don't go in that room. If you see a dragon, it's not how do we defeat that dragon? You're not going to defeat the dragon. It's basically telling you, don't go in there and fucking leave
Yeah.
because it'll murder you, and you all going to have to roll new characters. Whereas like the new stuff, it's more geared towards, it's more streamlined, right? Like 5th edition, it's a great system. I really do like all the changes, but it's I'm not a big fan. You know, it's funny. I'm not a big fan of classes, like classes in general in RPGs. Because if you think about it, it's like a lot of people are like, what would you, what class is Aragorn? What class is Legolas? What class is Gimli? I'm like, the cool thing about that world is like, it's really hard to do that. You could be like, oh, well, he's a ranger, because he's a ranger of the North, right? Well, he's a ranger. Well, is he a ranger? He doesn't really use magic.
Yeah.
He fights with, sword, spear, and bow. That's what rangers do. So it's like, is he a warrior? Is he this? Is he that? And it's that kind of complex mechanic where it's like characters should not be put into a box because people shouldn't really be put in a box. Like people change. You could be a mercenary fucking swordsman in your 20s and then you could be something else in your 30s and then in your 40s, so, and they say, well, you can multi-class and this and that, but it's like, I don't know, it's a little too gamey.
It's clunky
and
too.
It's yeah, it's min-maxy in a way because it's like, it's kind of like it's driving people in a direction. It's like, oh, well, you're the rogue, so okay, well, you can be an assassin or you could be a thief or you could do this. It's like, well, what does that mean? What is being a rogue? It's like an adjective. It's a noun for somebody or whatever. It's, I don't know, but I'm on the outskirts. There's a lot of people that's how they like to game, and that's just it. But
There's a lot of classless systems that are more skill based and point by. I'm not familiar with Star Trek. What is the characterizations like in that?
Star Trek is very open ended. Essentially, it's you make your character, you go through a life path system. It's actually really interesting, and a lot of there's focuses which are left up to the player, and then there are values which are left up to the player. So it's all interpretive, which is really neat because it's like, okay, well, these things happen to your player, to your character as you're building them. Maybe they went through Starfleet, maybe they didn't. Maybe they're an officer, maybe they're enlisted, blah 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 blah. And then there's like pivotal moments in their life of like, death of a friend, or they encountered a hostile species and that gives them certain things. But essentially your color, like, there's command, operations, and sciences, which is red, yellow, and blue. That's the color of their shirt. And it really comes down to your discipline. But you're essentially decent at a lot of different things. You're very everybody's multispectral. Everybody will have something inside because it's assumed that you go through Starfleet, or you go through schooling. You're going to have a basic knowledge of that. You could specialize in certain things, but the game does not railroad you. Like you get talents that can kind of specialize in, if you're a security officer, maybe you'll have bold, but the mechanics kind of function around. If you're going to do that, you may pay a price for that, even if it gives you a little extra something. So it's very egalitarian, which suits Star Trek very well.
Yeah.
It's different. I like it. But I'm also a fan of systems like Traveler, which has been around since like the 70s. I used to play in a long campaign for 3 years. I was playing 3 or 4 years. We were playing a 1977 Traveler campaign. And it is literally like you roll up your stats, you go through your life path, and that's it. There is no character advancement. It's you just go on adventures. And it's like I was the pilot and the captain of the ship, and we had like security officer, we had a former military guy, and it's just up to the DM. And it makes sense. You're in your 30s. What the fuck? You're not like leveling up. There is no level up. This is you now. So
I find it funny because Kamo in the chat just mentioned they just started Star Trek Next Gen, which is cool, but that's been out for a long time now. I remember, watching it when it was coming on, which just means I'm old, I think. But I went back and watched Deep Space Nine and went through the whole thing. I think of them all, like Deep Space Nine was probably my favorite. I like that grouping of characters the best.
It's the best written. DS9 started. Unfortunately, I love DS9. Cisco's probably my favorite captain. He's the most complex captain. You know, death of his wife, raising a son alone, single parent, hating. I mean, the first episode when they introduced him to Picard, and he was at Wolf 359. His wife was killed when Borg was Locutus, and that entire, he's angry. You've never seen a captain be introduced and be an angry person, have this like rage inside them.
Yeah.
And that in that part of the series, part of that writing of all the characters, it's the only franchise show that every single character has a character arc, and it's very well done. That they've never done that. Yeah, and I love TNG. Voyager's got some good seasons, and TOS is the first and second season are fantastic. The third season, but like that's the only show that's done that. The writing is fantastic, and it also harkens back to modern television. It is a narrative, takes place over 7 seasons, but it's this basically episodic, but it's this epic narrative that now we're used to, right? I mean, The Sopranos was the one that capitalized on it, and now like all these drama shows are 10 episodes, 1 hour each, and they're doing that with the new Trek, which is a shame to me.
Travesty. I have not checked out the new stuff. I think I watched like the one free episode and never got any further. Because it's another subscription.
Yeah.
Everything
CBS
is
All Access.
Yeah, everything is a subscription now. Well, now I'm kind of going through with Prime. Like everything has like a 7-day trial, pretty much. And I'm like, all right, let's trial this one for 7 days, and then we'll cancel. What can we binge over here?
Dude, you and everybody else.
Yeah. So we got to strike at the man however we can.
Dude, I tell you, like everybody was like, "Oh, I'm gonna cut the cord," and now the if you add up all the subscriptions, it's essentially like having cable television. You know what I mean?
It can if you get them all. It's weird.
Yeah.
There's a meme about being polyamorous, and your dating circle or your group circle is all based off of which streaming service they have, making the important life decisions. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's weird. We've got like Prime and Netflix, and that's enough. You just have to rotate. I think, like binge, cancel, re-up on a new one, and repeat, and just cycle through. But
I think we have the same thing, but I think we have Hulu, and now I actually paid a little bit extra to not have commercials on Hulu, and it's actually been pretty good.
Okay.
I think it's like $10 a month. But that's good because it's like they actually have some more movies than I figure they would, and they kind of cover what Amazon doesn't cover, and especially with like obviously like TV shows, right? Like you get episodes from that, which is kind of cool. I really don't watch a lot of TV, but because most of it's, who the hell watches daytime TV anymore?
What is that?
Yeah, I know. People still pay for it, though. It's weird.
Yeah, it took us a long time to cut it. I mean, we're like that last generation. Because like I think Gen X is like split down the middle somewheres, where it's either like you're still kind of like old school, where you have a house phone and cable, or you finally given it up, right? And then it's the generation after us where they're like, no, we're not doing any of that. So it took us a little while, and then we're like looking at expenses and going like, why are we paying for this? Like every one of us has a goddamn phone. Why do we have one that's attached to the house as well?
Yeah.
You know, and then like and cable just became so ridiculous. So
Well, that's the thing. It's just the amount of money that they expect people to pay for the service and what they got away with for so long. It's like embarrassing. Like it's like, wait, what? I was paying like my parents were paying like I think with their internet, all their cable, all their stuff, it was like $225 a month or some
yeah,
shit. I was like, that's a fucking car payment. And it's like you don't. By the way, it's like 1,000 channels, and you watch like three of them. Like,
yeah,
what is the point? You know? He's like, well, I gotta have my sports. You know, he's a big Yankees guy, so he's like, oh, I gotta have my Yankees. I gotta have. He's a big Rangers guy. I gotta have my NHL. I'm like, yeah, all right. Well, they offer. You know, I have MLB.net or whatever. I subscribe to that. I have the Yankees, so I just stream it right to my freaking through my PS4. And he's like, well,
yeah,
what is that? I was like, yeah, I paid like $90 for the entire fucking season,
yeah,
and I have basically every game. I mean, I don't get playoff games, but so there's like ways around it. You know, I feel
yeah.
bad for NFL people,
Well, I have friends
honestly.
too. They'll what they'll do is they'll just go to a bar and watch at a bar.
Yeah,
You know, and
that works.
nurse a beer for 2 hours, and
Fucking cheaper.
yeah, yeah, and plus, you know, you get to stick it to the man. That's the most important part.
Well, I'm surprised that like NFL hasn't done a deal. Like they do these cable deals and da 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 da, but I'm surprised they haven't done a deal with like Amazon, like directly with Hulu, Amazon, all that stuff. Like they kind of flirt with it. I've never
Yeah.
seen anything.
You,
At least
you
I mean, I might be wrong now, but I haven't seen anything.
Prime is weird. You can get like the Thursday night games
Yeah, I
live
know
for
it's
some
weird.
reason. just just Thursday night. That's it.
You know, we'll give
It's
you a little taste of things that
yeah,
you don't really want to see, but it's there.
yeah, yeah, pretty much. So you know what? It is almost time for us to head out. You mentioned doing a couple books. You want to talk about those real quick before we do get out of here?
Yeah, so I actually forgot to link it, but so I have my How to Draw Maps book, which came out in 2015. So that's self-published, and it was published through Impact Publishing. That company went under. They were there. FW Media was this massive. They've been around for like 100 years. It was a massive thing, and so when they went under, it was like a big deal in the publishing industry. So my second book was in the process of being done when this was happening, and it finally they got bought by Penguin Random House, which is another massive company. So the second book came out last year in November. So they're both available on Amazon. The first one teaches you how to essentially make world maps, draw them. You don't need a lot of skill. I'll teach you the skills basically. And then the second one focuses on like settlements and cities. So the first one's been really well received, which I'm really happy about. And the second one is all right. It just doesn't have a lot of. They didn't put any advertising behind it because of what was going on. So it's slowly building a following now. Um, but it's a trip, dude. Like
Well, I will
writing a
say,
book,
I bet it's a lot of work. I
it's a
will
lot of
say
work.
in the pinned comment we do have a link to your Twitter and your website, and you know through both of those links they can find the books that you've written,
Yeah,
plus
that's
other
true.
stuff as well, your Patreon, all that good stuff.
Hmm.
If you follow the breadcrumbs, they will find it. Yeah, writing a book is a lot of work. How different was that for you, being a person that's used to illustrating?
Well, it was crazy. Like having to write it and illustrate it
Yeah.
was it was 150 pages, and you have to do the layout too. So basically, the publisher is putting up the money, and you're pretty much and they're doing the editing, and obviously like they'll professionally lay it out and blah 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 blah. But the first book was good. It was they reined me in. I wrote a whole bunch of stuff, and they kind of trimmed where they needed to. The second book was a bit of a nightmare because they had cut like 50% of their staff,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't tell anybody. When you have that kind of big of a company, you don't want to alert your clients and such that you're in such financial trouble. So that was rough. There was a big revamp of the entire design of the book, and like they picked the title without me. I mean, it was really weird. It was really not a great experience with the company that went under for the second one. um but yeah, dude, like damn, it's hard writing manuscripts, and then having to go in and fucking illustrate everything, and then breaking down a process for people that aren't artists.
Mm.
You know what I mean? That's kind of the meat and potatoes of it. Is like, if you have some skill, you'll definitely take advantage, but you don't need to. I firmly believe drawing is a skill. There are people that don't really have artistic talent, and they can learn how to draw and draw quite well if they practice at it. And it's the same with map making. You can cover the basics, at least make a map that's functional. It looks right. It works right. And I'm not trying to teach grandmasters here. It's for beginners and moderate people, but everybody can get something out of it.
Get you through, drawing maps for your campaign.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome.
So, and it was fun just like talking about maps in general, all the things that people don't think about, like how rivers work. There are people like they just draw squiggles all over the map. I'm like, rivers don't work like that. They're like, well, it's a fantasy universe. I'm like, yeah, sure, but water is lazy. It'll follow the laziest route. You can't just have a fucking river that goes from like the north to the south all the way across between mountains. And it's like, no, those are the things you got to think about to make a map look real. You know what I mean? You got to have that basis in some reality.
How much research do you put into making maps?
I have a lot of reference of old maps and that I look at, that I take inspiration from. There is some research. Again, there's always a little element of realism that people will instinctually pick up on, and that's what you want to tap into. Like, I use a lot of textures, I use a lot of this, but if you look at my maps, like, you're trying to emulate something that, if it was real, kind of works. Even if it's fantastical, that's what you want to tap into, and it makes it believable and
How much time do you spend thinking about the tectonic plates?
well, once you know how tectonic plates work, not too much time. It's pretty easy. They grind up against each other. They create a mountain range. That mountain range could do this, and da-da-da-da. So it's like, you could also look at the real world. That's the thing. You just take inspiration from what we have. The Earth itself is there are places on the Earth that break those rules. Like, what is it? The Nile River is a prime example of a river that breaks a lot of river rules. It's fucking weird. It makes sense, but when you just look at it, you're like, wow, what's going on here? What is this? Right next to, like, it's going into the Mediterranean. There's a big thing here. There's this, like, but when you kind of look at it, it comes from like the highlands and like comes down. So it actually flows from, I think, south to north. And that's very strange for a major river. And civilization was built on that weird ass river, for a lot of people. So I don't know. It's a lot of that kind of stuff in the background.
Nice. On that note, we're going to head out. We're just over an hour now. I want to thank you for coming and hanging out. It was good to catch up and chat with you. And until next time.
Thanks for having me, man. It was a lot of fun.
Until next time, everyone, stay nerdy.
See ya.